Hi, good morning. Welcome to today's town hall meeting with Senate President Steve Sweeney. I'm Michelle Sakurka, President and CEO of the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, and we're pleased to partner with the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce today to bring you this program. Senator, first, I want to thank you for taking time to join us today and for your ongoing leadership during this incredibly challenging time in our state's history. And I also want to thank you for supporting the Recovery and Reinvention Framework put forth by the New Jersey Business Coalition. So I just want to give a couple of ground rules for this morning. Following the Senate President's introduction by Tom Bracken and the Senate President's presentation, Chrissy and Mike will lead a Q&A. For those of you who are new to this webinar platform, there is a chat feature that allows you to ask questions. We encourage you to do so, and we'll do our best to get to every question that's asked today. So I want to take a moment before we start to thank today's sponsors. Our sustaining sponsor, NJM, our foundation partners, AT&T, BMS, IEW, IBEW, Horizon, and Investors Bank. I also want to thank Piper Holdings, Prager Metis, Fidelity, JCP&L, New Jersey Resources, Amazon, Atlantic City Electric, AmeriHealth, Association Master Trust, Comcast, and South Jersey Industries. Senate President, as you can see, there are a lot of folks here supporting you today. Thank you again for taking time. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tom Bracken.
Thank you, Michelle. And I also want to thank the Senate President for taking time out of a very busy schedule to be with us today. Let me give you everybody an introduction to the Senate President, who probably does not need an introduction. That's a pretty overused term right now, but let me just give you some background on the Senate President and talk about a few things he's been doing for the business community as before and even during this pandemic. Senate President Sweeney was first elected to the New Jersey State Senate in 2001, representing the 3rd Legislative District. He's been Senate President since 2009. A year and a half ago, he created the Economic and Fiscal Policy Workshop, a bipartisan panel of legislators and economic experts that evaluated the state's most challenging fiscal problems and issued a series of recommendations, many of which the State Chamber and the NJBIA have supported. It's commonly known as Path to Progress. When the stay-at-home orders were first put in place, Senate President Sweeney issued a list of suggestions for economic relief, including a small business sales tax remittance reduction, a payroll and sales tax holiday, the extension of the tax filing and permit deadlines, and a business credit for quarantine workers. He also introduced legislation that is now on the governor's desk that would allow the state to save money and avoid mass layoffs during this health crisis by partially furloughing government workers. He has been a fervent proponent of opening our state's businesses and the economy at a faster pace as the recovery has begun, and he has questioned the need for $14 billion of new state debt, or any debt for that matter, without cutting the cost of government first. All that said, it leads to the Senate President's very cautious voice in addressing the state's fiscal problems and showing his leadership to address our future in a fiscally responsible way. With that, I'd like to introduce Steve Sweeney, the Senate President of the New Jersey Senate. Steve?
Thanks. And, those introductions are, not needed. But can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm beyond frustrated right now. The administration keeps saying data drives decisions. But this is going on 8 weeks, so I've asked to see the data so I could understand how we're making the decisions. We are moving too slowly. Businesses are opened up all around us. We belong to a consortium of states. If you want to go get a haircut, go to Delaware. You want your nails done, go to Delaware. You want to go to a gym, go to Delaware. It's right next door to me. Every day that we hold back is one more nail in the coffin of a small business, and it's not acceptable. This was never intended to get to zero. The shutdown was intended to bring the curve down, and the governor absolutely deserves a great deal of credit for bringing that curve down. But it's time to open up businesses. And I don't think they're using data, to be perfectly honest with you. Why can't restaurants open this Friday? Why can't they have an extra weekend? Because you decided on the 15th. Show me the data that made that decision that way. As you can tell, I'm getting angry because we're putting people out of business. I get phone calls from business owners that have told me that they've survived recessions, you know, upturns, downturns in business themselves in their own little businesses. And the one thing that got me the most was one small shop owner said to me, he said, I can't believe after surviving all this for 20 years, my government is putting me out of business. You know, that's upsetting and it's not acceptable. Data has to be shown. Why won't they show the data that's driving these decisions? I'm going to tell you why. There isn't any. I figured it out. They would have showed it to me. I'm complaining too much for too long. The way you shut up a complainer is you show them. It's like, you know, I'm not from Missouri. I'm not from the Show Me state, but show me, and I would be okay. But we need to get our businesses open now, and you know, doing it socially with social distance, with being safe. You know, the governor tried to rush us into borrowing a whole bunch of money real fast. His comments were, if we don't get in there first, the money will be gone. Guess what, Tom? That's not true. The $500 billion that the federal government set aside for borrowing had an allotment for each state. Each state had a dollar amount associated with it. And that money's not going to disappear. It's available to the end of December. And I want to know where we're at. Listen, I know we're going to have to borrow something, without question. We're going to have to borrow some money. That goes without question. But why aren't we trying to do some things differently as we're doing this to try to reduce costs? All you're hearing is about borrowing. You know, the governor talks about a furlough, you know, like laying all these public employees off. Why won't he sign my furlough bill that we passed in both houses? That helps the private sector too, as you know. That furlough bill is a good bill. All but one legislator voted for it. It's time to start moving forward with things that can save money. I got a teacher's health care bill, can save over $1 billion. That's still stuck. So, you know, Tom, we got to have conversations and start finding ways to reduce costs. Furlough bill can reduce costs. The teacher's health care bill can reduce costs. And what are we willing to change? What are we willing to change to reduce costs further before we borrow all this money? And by the way, the borrowing bill doesn't have a cap on it. And the towns and counties already told me, I mean, that I was on a webinar with the League of Municipalities Executive Board. They said to me, we don't want you to borrow money for us. We have better credit rating than the state. And if we're going to borrow money, we'll borrow it ourselves. So, you know, I'm just, you know, we've done a whole bunch of these calls. You know, we're extended a lockdown another 30 days. It's time that we start really pushing harder to get things opened up. And, you know, Senator Sarlo and Urho and Singleton and Ruiz, I think have done a very good job with the committee we created, because it seems like every time we announce we're going to hold a hearing on something, they announce when they're going to open it up. So it could be a coincidence, but I think the job that the senators are doing is very good and is moving things forward. So I want to get our businesses back open. I want them open safely. I think the social distancing, everything the governor had said on that, we should follow. But I believe you give businesses guidance. Business owners are very creative people. I'd say they're the most creative people that you'll ever meet, because they found a way to create a business to support their family. So it's time for us to give guidance to businesses and let them open up. Golf courses. I don't golf. I just never took up golf. But why do they have to have twice the time in between? Why is it still 16 minutes? Let these businesses open up. Restaurants. If I'm going to move half the capacity outside, why can't I have half the capacity inside and let these businesses open up 100% capacity with social distancing? These are questions that are being asked by a lot of common sense, you know, a lot of people. They want answers. And since the governor does say data drives decisions, or whatever it is, show us the data. Let's get going. But with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you, Senate President, for joining us this morning. Thank you for all of your efforts. I mean, we've been obviously working with you as well as your entire team, who has been extremely responsive. We appreciated the opportunity as well to join your panel discussion with Senator Sarlo and Senator Oraho to discuss the challenges that the small business community has been facing. We, as well as the Business Coalition, which is now over 100 business associations, I should say, strong, has been really advocating for a lot of the points that you had just mentioned, which is what is that specific guidance needed to have our businesses open? You know, what is the data so that we know what we're heading towards and what that goalpost looks like so they can adequately prepare. And we're seeing right now a lot of different states, as you alluded to, opening up, and you know, obviously want to make sure that everyone is safe, but that predictability is really key to getting our economy back up and running. A lot of reports coming out right now about the impact this has had across the board. You know, GDP declining, revenues declining, impact to our small and minority-owned businesses has been substantial. And so again, you know, we do want to see the economy open as safely and as quickly as possible so that we can get our business community back up and running. And again, thank you for your efforts with your recovery panel. You know, it's been great to hear a lot of the different concerns raised by the different industries. And I know that we are starting to see some of those industries open, which is really, really promising. I have several questions that have come in, and I know Mike and I are going to go back and forth with asking some of them. But you did mention a lot about this savings and the budgetary process moving forward. Again, borrowing may be a part of the piece of the puzzle. So again, I think that we're very interested in hearing a lot more about, you know, where you see the Senate going with the borrowing bill, with the budget moving forward, again, with some revenues down. And clearly at this point in time, it's going to be really challenging for the business community to take on, you know, any additional costs at this point in time. So I have a couple of questions I want to string together. One of which is on, you know, additional costs being put forth by anything dealing with liability issues. So business community is going to start reopening. We want to make sure that everyone is protected, everybody is safe, but now it's getting a little challenging to determine, you know, who contacted the disease or the virus when and where. And so we want to make sure that a business is not straddled with a frivolous lawsuit. And so this liability protection is going to be critical. Again, not protecting any bad actor, but again, that guidance and predictability is key. So if a business adheres to everything that the CDC puts out, liability protection is really, really critical. And we've been advocating for it on a federal level. No action has been taken, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on a statewide level, how we can move that forward so that a business can safely reopen and we have the consumer confidence as well.
Well, you know, Christy, I first want to, before I get into that, I want to recognize the job that BIA and the Chamber did putting a plan together. It actually was an excellent plan. The committee that we have with Senator Sarlo is a platform for businesses to publicly get out what's going on. I wanted to acknowledge that first.
Thank you.
And I just lost my place. What was the question again?
I was bringing up some of the points that we're hearing about liability protection.
Oh yeah, I got you. See, Christy, it's going to have to be addressed. I know that's what they're talking about in Washington right now, and I think that's probably what's going to get the deal done. Because if business owners do everything by the book, how do you hold them liable if they've done everything by the book? And we want them to open up. But I got to tell you, it's going to be quite a fight, because I know when we did it, giving immunity to hospitals and doctors, if you remember when this pandemic started, we had some very heated discussions in the Senate. But I don't think it can be ignored. I think it's going to have to be addressed. And again, you know, if someone grossly ignored things, well, then you should be sued if you caused a spread. But if you followed all the guidance and you've done everything humanly possible to limit it, well, then why are you going to be punished if you've done everything you possibly can do? So that's going to be a conversation that's going to be had as businesses open up. But why would I open up my business if I'm going to open myself up to, to being sued? And, Christy, and remember, we shut businesses down to flatten the curve, lower the curve. And I'm telling you, my frustration of being part of a state consortium where all the states around us are moving seems like 2 weeks ahead of us. And down where I live, today I think we had 11 cases in Gloucester County. 11. You know what I mean? I think the governor's task was good, but we need to open up right now. But the liability is going to be an issue we will be addressing, I'm sure.
Hey, Christy, let me ask the Senate President a question on the issue of the budget and the borrowing. I have heard that there's about $1 billion to $2 billion of opportunity in New Jersey to tax commuters who are no longer working in New York, but are now working from their homes in New Jersey. When they were working in New York, they paid income tax to the city of New York and the state of New York. Now that they're in New Jersey, why are we not taxing them at the New Jersey level and getting that income into the state?
Tom, we should be. Bottom line, we should be, because you remember it's New York that took the money out, the way they wrote their tax laws. So we should be. And I'm hoping, I'll be meeting with the administration this week. Hopefully we'll have a conversation on what their plan is to capture that revenue.
That's a big number. I mean, I've heard between $1 billion and $2 billion. That's not chump change.
No, and Tom, like I said, New York made sure that they captured it and that we didn't get a penny of it, as you remember, several years back.
Senator, good to see you this morning.
I'm actually wearing a shirt. I'm wearing a suit today. No tie.
I got my logo on with the state.
I got you.
You don't want to know how old that shirt is, though. I know there was legislation in consideration in the past if there was ever a crisis, and certainly we are in a crisis mode, to hit the pause button on minimum wage. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I know you're very methodical with your caucus, and we've been hearing from a lot of particularly small business owners. I was on the virtual session yesterday with Sarlo and Oroho and the committee. My heart goes out to those restaurant owners, and just wanted to get your thoughts on going forward. Would you be open to the ability to nothing more than hit the pause button to give people a chance to ramp up?
Like, that'll be discussion that will be had probably in the fall, early in the fall, because it doesn't happen until January.
Right.
Right now, the employment issue is really tough because, with what the federal government did with the CARES Act, I'm even having a hard time getting iron workers to go back to work. You know what I mean? Because they're making more money.
Right.
But some of these frontline workers, these essential workers, were actually being paid more money because they, hazardous pay they were getting. But again, it's going to have to be looked at. Everything is going to be different, and is going to have to be reviewed to make sure we don't do any more damage to the environment, to the economy. You know what I'm saying, Mike? Nothing won't be looked at, and it won't be looked at in a vacuum. And hopefully, we'll be back. Instead of doing these damn calls, we'll be able to be in person and do some things, and which seems like it's a hell of a lot more fun than this way.
All right. Thank you.
Senate President, thank you for your comments on minimum wage. I know I'm also hearing from a lot of our members. First, of course, they want to reopen for those who haven't been, but clearly, especially those who are healthcare providers and receive reimbursement through the state, and won't only it will cost the business, it'll cost the state funding as well. And I think we're simply asking, as Mike alluded to, just some reconsideration there, just a pause button. If there were ever an economic time to do so, I think now would certainly be the time to revisit that. And as companies, as they're going to start to reopen, look at their budgeting, now and heading into the fall, we really do appreciate your consideration and look forward to working with you on that for to address this really serious critical issue of that labor cost. So thank you for that. We're also getting some questions about, what to expect for the budget moving forward. Again, knowing that we have some, a lot of revenues have decreased. We see sales tax going down. Everything else is going down at this point. Borrowing is on the table. Can you just elaborate a little bit further about what you expect for the 3-month budget we're heading into, and then also what we should expect, for the summer months heading into the next fiscal year's budget, which I know will be challenging, and certainly the business community looks forward to working with you on that.
Well, Christy, the biggest problem we have right now is we don't have a lot of answers. The administration has not provided us the information. They might not have it, but we have to start to get it so that we can figure out the next 3 months and get ready for the 9-month budget. My biggest concern right now, though, Christy, is if we're going to borrow 10 billion, I want to know what the game plan is. I really want to look at this year's budget and next year's budget, because I go on sites, the Senate President's Forum, National Conference of State Legislative Leaders, and everyone that I've spoken to is talking about next year being pretty bad and the following year not being that much better. And if we borrow $10 billion to run state government for basically, forget we extended the budget, from July to June, we're going to insert $10 billion of borrowing, and our economy's not back, our revenues are down, and that $10 billion is gone. Now you're going to have to do drastic cuts to programs, and you're going to have to raise a lot of taxes. And what I'd like to know is, I know it's not possible, no one has a crystal ball, but it doesn't mean you can't try to project out and look at what could be the future and what the concerns are, because I like to know what I'm walking into, and right now we don't have a clue what we're walking into. And that's the biggest problem that we have as a legislature. We don't have numbers. We don't know. The administration hasn't provided anything yet, and what they provided is sketchy at best. So, Christy, it's basically, we don't even know what we're going to do with the we got a short period of time to do this 3-month budget, and we don't have any agreement yet. I can't speak for the Assembly, but I think both houses are lacking information right now.
Senator, one of the questions we got is the following: is there a possibility of legislation to protect higher education from lawsuits for a refund of tuition fees or for a reduced campus experience as advertised by the institutions, given the necessary steps these institutions have taken to comply with executive orders and protect the health and safety of our campus communities?
Michael, this is the first time I've heard this one, but one of my concerns is that some of our schools are going to not make it. Some of our schools are definitely not going to make it. That they're large employers in different parts of the state. I know that just where I'm at, Rowan is losing they're taking a $50 million hit in 1 year. These schools are shortchanged. We're one of the least supportive states in the country. I think we're 49th when it comes to higher education. We don't support them the way we should. And now the situation we're in, where we're cutting them even further, Michael, the question's a good question. We can look at it. Again, we can look at it. But right now, my concern is how many schools are we going to lose?
Yeah. My son's home from Rome right now. He was really enjoying the experience, and he did well virtually, but I know he misses that whole experience. Actually, he turns 21 tomorrow too, so you can imagine. I told him we'll have a do-over. I'll take him out to Capitol Grill as a makeup. But I know Teresa Ruiz was very upset about the ability to have enough internet providing to some of the unfortunate students that can't get online still, which has to be corrected if if that continues, or if the pandemic resurges or what have you. So that should be a priority too.
Michael, and the other point is, we got a lot of CARES Act money. I don't know what we're holding it back for. It should be going towards issues like Senator Ruiz said, to make sure kids have the laptops or iPads, that we have internet access in deprived areas, so all children get a chance to learn, that these kids don't fall back. They're in tough situations, socially and economically to start with. And now you're going to set them back even further by not providing opportunities. There's a lot of CARES Act money, and it should go to help these different programs. Senator Stack did a bill for rental assistance. It was $100 million for rental assistance. And it was using some old Sandy funds that are available that could have been used, and some CARES Act money. Well, we passed it and put it on the governor's desk, and the governor wound up doing his own program, which we're grateful for, with $100 million of CARES Act funding. My point is, that's what the funding's for, and utilizing it to help people in this time of crisis. Let's start putting it in places to help small businesses and to help our colleges. And there's 2.4 billion, I think, or 1.8 billion. That could go a long way to helping a lot of our schools right now, and our businesses, and all the way around. So, Michael, yeah, we gotta start focusing on that. We can't forget that money. Look, governor did a good job. He got the feds to loosen it up. You know what I mean? At first, we couldn't use it for anything. He got the feds to loosen it up. Well, now it's loosened up. How about if we start investing it?
Senate President, to that point, actually, the federal CARES Act funding has always, in our opinion, has always been able to be utilized for COVID-related expenses. And so we have been actually advocating for that, to your point about getting that money on the street. And we know there's a ton of competing interests, whether it's on the healthcare side, whether it's on education, and certainly on small business, who, again, the government said that you need to close during this crisis, and is still closed in many circumstances. Within the governor's budget right now is a $100 million appropriation of that federal CARES Act funding, which is over $2 billion in total towards the small business community, 50 million of which has already been essentially spoken for through the EDA grants that are being released today. So there's only additional 50 million. I know that the administration is still deciding how to use that other 50 million, but to your point, there is federal CARES Act funding. We have been calling for it to be utilized, certainly to make sure that our smallest businesses are able to reopen. To that point as well, I know that the manufacturing caucus is looking to reconvene, and there's been a lot of discussion about the lack of PPE, which is sorely needed in the state. Our manufacturers need to be able to thrive and to grow and to sustain themselves as well. And so, again, there is federal funding available. We want to make sure it gets to those who need it. And I know you've spoken out about helping, that specific sector as well. And I'd love for you to comment a little bit further on the manufacturing sector in the state.
Well, Christy, I look at this pandemic actually is in some narrow areas provided opportunities, and we should be propping up our own PPE production here in the state and providing tax credits or CARES dollars to help these manufacturers shift so that we don't ever have to rely on another country. This country, our states, we're all bidding against each other. So listen, if we got to pay a couple more bucks to buy something that was manufactured in New Jersey, so what? We're going to have jobs. We're going to have, that production in New Jersey is going to create economic opportunity for New Jersey. So we really should be propping up. I know President Hushman at Rowan, he was talking about building a building to start producing PPE, bringing manufacturing, like build a spec building to bring people in to be that PPE supplier. So there's an opportunity here to actually help business, and we should be looking to use those dollars or tax credits to get to prop up some manufacturing so that we don't ever have to wait for China or wherever to bring this product to us. And you know, this is a product that has to be refreshed too. You know, these masks don't last forever, so it is a business that could probably do very well and might serve a whole region, not just New Jersey.
Yeah, well
Senate
said,
President.
Senator. Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you. On that point, just want to let you know, we have been working with a series of partners on how we could establish either a cooperative or a consortium and put a prioritization on manufacturing here in New Jersey. So there's some great surveying on capacity going on right now, and then how we can fill that pipeline. We look forward to sharing that information as we learn. And I do just want to circle back one more minute to internet and capacity in our inner cities as well, because we could give students laptops. They have been given laptops and access to internet. They need to come together and learn, because some of them live in homes where they're not enabled or empowered to be able to do that. To that end, we have a lot of businesses who conduct indoor activities around learning circles, around opportunities for educational advancement for students that are stuck right now in a definition of not being considered retail. And every time we talk about indoor activity, we get a delay mode. So we need to take a step up on how we advance the opportunity to bring students together into small learning communities that might be either in libraries or children's museums or reading centers with reading circles. These are significant to literacy right now. And we're going to be putting a lot of attention on that over this next week with some discussions we're having. So we look forward to seeking your support on that as well.
Well, Michelle, it's important we start doing those things again, you know, and what like I said, I keep going back to the idea of this, like this shutdown was to get the curve down. Well, the curve's down. So, but you know, you're going to see spikes. So as we open up everything, you're going to see some spikes. But the idea was to make sure our healthcare system can manage that. You know, kids actually need to be around kids. You know what I mean? You know, it's harming their health, their mental health, when kids can't be around other kids. And, you know, again, it's how are you going to keep second graders away from each other? You know what I mean? But we have to start trying to teach the kids, but at least let them have that interaction, even if it's small group interaction with others. I look forward to what you bring forward, because that is absolutely, you see a lot of sad kids right now. You know what I mean? And that's what scares me, is the impact of their mental health. You know, when, you know, we're used to embracing people. We're used to, you know, that personal contact. You know, we will get some spikes, and I don't take that for granted, but we have to start finding ways to open up again. You know, if the World Health Organization just said asymptomatic people don't spread it, you know what I'm saying? So we're learning more and more. My brother's head of emergency medicine at the hospital he works at. He said the first week when this hit, doctors and nurses got sick. After that, they didn't get one person sick. They figured it out. And what I'm saying is, I think that we have the capability to figure this thing out, but sitting still like we're sitting still, following everyone else instead of being with everyone else, is not really good right now. It's bad for our economy, and it's bad for our businesses.
Senate President, just on that topic we talked about earlier about PPE, businesses need PPE. They're having difficulty getting it at a reasonable price. Several states around the country have used their buying power to buy PPE in bulk and then sold it to the business community. Our state, as you know, has a 7-state consortium with the Northeast. One of the benefits of that is to have a buying consortium to buy PPE at a discount. And we have asked several times why the state couldn't buy more and provide that discounted PPE to the business community, because then they could get it at a lower price, and also the availability issue that they have right now would be satisfied. Have you heard of any movement to do that?
No, but Tom, I don't know why we can't, like what we said earlier, prop up some businesses, you know, that make PPE. And honestly, if we have to supplement them supplement them. Look at the cost. Look at the economic cost by not having it. I'd rather pay a little bit more money to make sure I have a supply in place and that we buy enough for everybody, Tom. Not just, listen, if we buy for the businesses, that's a good thing. If we bulk purchase, that's the best price you're going to get. So if I'm buying masks and gloves and everything for all the businesses in the state, all the governments in the state, and then you add it by 6 or 7 states, normally you get a pretty good price. That's the concept of bulk purchase. But what I'm saying is, why not then buy it from New Jersey? Why aren't we propping up manufacturing in New Jersey to be that supplier? Because right now we're buying it from other places. I would like New Jersey to be the state that supplies all this.
I think that's a great idea, but I'm just talking about in the immediate near term, as people are opening up and they have the need for PPE. What the bulk purchase of the state could do would be supply that immediate need and then get to what you're talking about at a later date.
Well, Tom, they announced that consortium. How long ago did they announce the consortium? And
Months.
and they said that's what they were going to do, if you recall.
Yeah.
They said they were going to do that. That's a good question that we can ask the administration.
Well,
Where are we at with this?
The answer we got was that they wanted to make sure that the hospitals had their enough supply to stockpile for a resurgence of the pandemic, but I guess they're not there yet.
Yeah, but
just
that's not acceptable.
I should say, from the state perspective, we do believe there's some capacity coming through some discussions. And again, this idea of the purchase consortium is exactly to marry this demand in the state with the supply. So we are doing some assessment on that right now, and this is the exact support we're going to need to get something like this across the finish line for sure. So look forward to that.
Well, that's great. And like I said, Michelle, as we're buying from other countries this material, this is never going away. They've talked about a scenario like this for 2 decades. And these piles have to be refreshed on a regular basis because, the mass, the elasticity of the rubber, dries out. What I'm saying is, let's open some businesses up here in New Jersey and utilize our ability to sell to the whole region to bring our costs down. Again, I just think that we should be moving forward much quicker than we are. And like I said, it just doesn't make any sense not to be moving quickly on this. Here's an area where we could probably actually create jobs.
To that end too, Senator, thankfully when the pandemic hit, a little shout out to some of our big member companies that had PPE and donated them, when the pandemic hit, because I know they always felt there was going to be another 9/11 down the road. So thankfully, they did the right thing to help us out. 2 quick questions. We're doing the legislative hearings virtually right now, and understandably, do you have a sense or an idea as to when you want to start having the in-person hearings again? Are you thinking about in the fall? Do you have an idea of that?
Yeah, actually, we're looking at doing it now, Mike, until the governor signed the extension for another 30 days. Again, the curve is down. We've done well. As we open up, it will spike a little bit, but we understand that the spikes have to be accepted. I mean, have to be expected as more people are out there. I mean, if we're going to try to get to 0, then we're never opening up, and the economy's gone, and basically the world's over. So I wanted to open up the legislative offices. We actually had approached the administration and said we would like to start working from our offices again. But Mike, as soon as this order expires, because I can't possibly imagine the governor trying to do another 30-day order,
Right.
that we will come back to work, and July, August, and September we're going to be doing the budget.
Yep.
We'll be doing the budget. The budget process normally is a 3-month process, and this is probably going to be one of the hardest ones. So yeah, I expect to be in the legislature all summer long. I really regret that we moved our budget deadline. We're the only state that did it, and at the time it looked like a good idea, but now there's still so much uncertainty on the budget. Even at this point, we might as well have just gone ahead with it. But that's water under the dam.
Understandably. And as you know, this is probably like my 26th state budget. So we'll be there and look forward to having that seat at the table to work with you and members of your caucus. I know it's going to be a difficult budget, but I think if we put all our heads together, we'll figure it out as we've always done. We've lived through some crises, whether it was 9/11 or the financial crisis in 2008 and 9. So certainly, we offer our services there. Speaking of, the governor had Kevin Corbett yesterday, and NJ Transit unveiled their 10-year strategic plan and their 5-year capital plan. I wanted to get your thoughts on, that, as well as, the state chamber was supportive of the Turnpike capital plan, and we're big believers in infrastructure and, bringing people together and building, for the economy. Just wanted to get your thoughts on all of that.
Well, I haven't actually had a chance to see the NJ Transit capital budget yet, Mike. But what's most important is the governor, signed the toll hikes, focusing on, infrastructure. Stimulus. That's what I look at those toll hikes as stimulus. We got to make sure that we get that money out the door as quickly as possible so that we can get projects moving quickly that will put people to work, but will actually improve the quality of life that we all have around here. I'm excited to know that the Turnpike down where I live will finally be expanded. When John Corzine did the last toll hike, that really had a huge impact on people's quality of life, fixing the Turnpike at the chokeholds. They said, 64 years ago, the Turnpike was a 4-lane highway. Where I live, it's still a 4-lane highway. So it'd be nice to see that, modernized as you see all the growth that's coming down here. The light rail project from Camden to Gloucester, and a lot of the parkway improvements that they're talking about. That money has to get out the door quickly. So we put people to work, and at the end, people say, well, oh, now I see what they did with my dollars. Right. Because under John Corzine, Christie cut the ribbon. That probably what John Corzine did is a legacy moment for Governor Corzine, because I know my commute on the Turnpike, north to south, was cut it by 35, 40 minutes, and it was a safer commute. You remember before we did it, people were going 90 miles an hour on top of each other. Now it's a little more spread out. So, that really is a quality of life. If you give me a half hour each way every day of the week, back to me rather than sitting in congestion, that's quality of life. So we want to see heavy investment in infrastructure, and we want it moving quickly, because it doesn't do us any good to keep it in a kitty. It needs to be out there.
Right, and I understand the federal government is also looking at that, and we've been in discussions with the congressional delegation, because that'll help move the needle with regard to the economy as well.
Oh, listen, I think there's a deal down in Washington, Mike, and it's going to address a whole bunch of things. That's why I'm hesitant borrowing too, because I think there will be a bailout of the states. Senator Menendez has a very good bill, and he's gaining steam. He's gaining traction. He's getting Republican co-sponsors of it, and that's 500 million. 500 billion. The borrowing pot's 500 billion. I'm hoping that we, by not rushing out to borrow, we don't turn the federal government away from helping us out to just giving us a loan. So, I think that, when you talk about immunity, that's going to be part of getting a deal done in Washington. It's going to have to be at some point. So there's a sweet spot. And I know the administration is going to be looking for infrastructure too. And God knows we need the Gateway Tunnel. The Gateway Tunnel has to get done. And so does the Portal Bridge. So again, hopefully they put their partisanship down for a little bit to focus on the public and the people here. I'm pretty proud here in New Jersey, my Republican colleagues, my Democrat partners have really worked well together, and have accomplished a great deal of stuff up to this point. So hopefully that continues.
Thank you.
Senate President,
Senate
we're getting,
President-
oh, go ahead, Michelle.
No, you're going to ask, I think you're going to ask some of the questions from the audience. So go ahead.
Yeah,
Kristen.
Senate President, I'm just trying to scroll through some of the questions, and there's several of them. I know we won't get to them all, but we'll certainly submit them to your office. Definitely getting some comments and/or questions, so I just wanted to rattle off a few. Definitely a focus on making sure we're aware of the additional costs put on business through any additional mandates. There's some specific bills mentioned in here as well. Again, with so many of our businesses that are absolutely shut down to this day at this point in time, we're just asking folks to be very mindful across the board of any additional cost that doesn't come through as an additional tax increase per se, but could come in other forms. And so I'll just kind of summarize and just say there's several of them in there, and I just wanted to make sure I just mentioned that. And I know you had commented earlier that you would be certainly open to working with the business community and clearly aware of our concern, knowing that our businesses are still closed. To that end, one of the things that the business community has put forth in our recommendations is for year 2021 and the impact of the unemployment experience rating. And I know legislation has been introduced to ensure that a business is not held accountable for that. I shouldn't say accountable, but to make sure that experience rating is taken into account, knowing that so many businesses had to unfortunately lay off their employees. So that's just certainly something that we want you to have on your radar screen. And then of course, I'm getting a lot of questions about, we have paid into unemployment and we're not getting our unemployment checks. And so I summarized a few things for you right there, but mandates, unemployment experience rating tied to folks who are still obviously, need to get resources from the state at this point in time.
And Christy, I'm really proud of something I and Tom Kane did back in 2009 when we stopped the rating of the unemployment and the second injury fund. You remember that?
Yep.
We had taken $4 billion, and the people on this call which had supported it. We stopped the rating. There was $4 billion taken out of that fund, and by stopping the rating, we're actually in a position now. We're probably in better position in one category in the nation. We're probably one of the best states when it comes to unemployment in the nation right now because we didn't raid the funds. We protected them, and that's something that we did in a bipartisan fashion. It was very important. And what's going on with unemployment is not acceptable. I don't know if you can hear my phone ring, but it rings on a regular basis. If you're here on a Saturday, if you're here on a Sunday, people are desperate. They haven't gotten a check in 10 or 12 weeks, and it's not good enough. The Commissioner of Labor is one of the best commissioners of labor I've worked with, but the situation that he's dealing with is unattainable. You know what I mean? We relaxed. We did a bill to relax civil service rules so we could get more people trained to do this and process unemployment claims. We've offered our offices train our employees so we can try to help people. As a young iron worker, I know what it was like to collect unemployment. And I got to tell you, it's not a good feeling when you collect unemployment. It's actually somewhat humiliating when you can't find a job to support your family. And then to pay into it and they can't get any of it is problematic. And it's actually, Christy, I look at it with my industry. I have a hard time getting my members to go back to work now because if they go back to work, they're afraid they won't be able to get back on unemployment. And that's how my industry is. You work for a month, you work for a week, and then and the uncertainty with the system. That we're going to have a thorough review. I'm going to be appointing a committee. It's called Review and Recovery, and we want to review everything. How the unemployment system, how it failed. Especially when you have a competent commissioner. How things didn't work well and what do we need to do? Because we always say it's never going to happen again, and then it happens again. So we want to make sure that we're in a much better position. And like our unemployment system itself, the last governor actually really looked at it was Governor McGreevey, and every governor since him has known that we have a problem with the system. So we can't ignore it any longer.
Senator, to that point, I've lived through in the years I've been with the state chamber, the unemployment system, and I remember back in the 2008-9 crash, when we went back to use UI money, there was nothing left there because it was paid for, money was used for charity care from both parties. But we, again, got involved and worked closely with Senator Madden and Joe Egan in the Assembly, and the collective of us, worked on making sure there wasn't sticker shock because it's a payroll tax. And we all came to an agreement, and voila, we got to solvency. Of course, a lot of that money was used up at the beginning. So I would say to you, when you do look at it, please look at all of us, from the business community, because we want to be helpful. We were able to put solvency back in there. We can definitely do it again. So.
Well, you helped us the first time, Mike. The first time when we did the constitutional question,
Right.
The business community was very much with us, and when we worked together, and that was one of the times you saw labor and business and government all came together, and it was a success story. So obviously we will. Our goal was to keep unemployment costs as low as they possibly could be on our employers and our workers. Yep. And we actually had accomplished that. Mike, the fun thing was when we would hear that we were cutting the unemployment tax. Over the last several years, there would be announcements that we were cutting it, a couple $100 million here, a couple $100 million there. That was great to hear. It's much more enjoyable to hear about cutting taxes than raising taxes.
Yep. And to one more note to that, we're hearing a lot from the progressive groups saying that they want refunds on everything. And when we worked on the Transportation Trust Fund, we balanced it out with the estate tax. We did a lot of good work together. It would really be sinful if we had to, and understandably the budget's going to be tough, but to say, let's just hand everything over what we did in the last decade to help businesses out. And how hard right now businesses are having a difficult time to get their operations up and running again. And some of them might not make it to the finish line. So I would, implore you to, as you meet and discuss the budget, to understand that these things that we set in motion in the last 10 years have really helped the business community out across the board, from the Fortune 500 to the mom and pops. And I would hope, as you said, everything's on the table, that we wouldn't have to look at, repealing back some of the good work that we've done.
And like I said, I read the reports the progressives have been putting out, and their only solution is to raise taxes. And why can't we reform government? Why can't we do government better? Why can't we do government different? Why, before this pandemic hit, I actually had school districts that voluntarily were looking at consolidation. On their own, they were looking at it. Because we were doing all those meetings and having these conversations about path to progress. Look, we talked about path to progress. I got a new healthcare bill done with the teachers. Hopefully it'll advance pretty soon over in the assembly and get to the governor's desk. So we just can't go back to like nothing's changed. If this is a new norm and we're living in a new world, then why do we continue to operate government like it was like nothing happened? We couldn't afford it before this happened. We couldn't afford the government we had before this happened, and we definitely can't afford it now. So we're going to have to figure out how to provide services.
Yeah,
Yep.
Senate President, I think we certainly echo, what Mike had alluded to as well. And, with additional funding coming in, we can't not address those structural challenges. And I know we went through several of the provisions that certainly can address some of the costs moving forward, but certainly don't want to lose sight of the fact that, the state has had, challenges being fiscally solvent. And so we don't want to lose sight of that at all. And I appreciate you acknowledging that your office is receiving a lot of constituent feedback from the small business community and those who are on unemployment, because as that conversation was ensuing here, some of the feedback turned into capital letters. So I want to just acknowledge all of our folks who are listening, that, message received. We are out there just like you are, and I know the chamber is fielding these questions day in and day out. We recognize the pain that the small businesses and their employees are in right now, which is why we are stressing for a safe and guided reopening as quickly as possible. And again, I think it really shows the value of the business community here. When businesses are shut, it has such a cyclical effect on the economy, to unemployment, to lost revenues, et cetera. And so, whatever we can do to work with you, your office, the assembly, and the governor's office, again, to have a safe and expeditious recovery, please know the business community stands willing to work with you.
Christy, and I really do appreciate the work that the business community has had with us, because we've had several successes, and we're going to need you as we work our way through this. We're going to need your voices, because we don't want to do any more damage that's already been done.
So Senator, we want to thank you very much for your time today. See, we've rounded the hour, and we're so sensitive to how busy everyone's schedule is, especially yours. So thank you again on behalf of the Chamber and JBIA, all our viewers out there. Again, all the comments will be shared with the Senator's office. And Senator, continue to be safe out there. Thank you for your leadership. We look forward to continue to partner in moving the recovery and reinvention in New Jersey forward.
You too. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.